2 weeks ago, I visited Six Flags Over Texas in Arlington, Texas. This was the first Six Flags park to open in the chain, and it simply blew me away. The park has an amazing atmosphere with plenty of scenery and a wide variety of roller coasters to enjoy. The park has 13 of them, and I was able to get on 12, the one exception being Wile E. Coyote's Grand Canyon Blaster since I was too tall to ride it without a child. But once again, if I'm going to miss riding anything, it'll certainly be a kiddie coaster. So once again, it's time to rank these coasters from my least to most favorite. But before we head into the top 10, here are a couple coasters that didn't make the cut. Number 12 is the Mini Mine Train. This is the tamest coaster in the park, so it's naturally coming in last. However, I will say that this is an excellent coaster for young coaster enthusiasts in the making. I even got a bit of airtime on it, which I certainly didn't expect from a kiddie coaster. It may not be anything fast or exhilarating, but it's fun for the whole family, so go ahead and give it a ride. Number 11 is the Runaway Mine Train. This is an aero mine train with the same name as the one at Six Flags Great Adventure, the main difference being that this one has tunnels and three lift hills. While the ride itself is kind of rough overall, I will give it credit for its surprise ending. You see, after the third lift hill, there's an unexpectedly intense drop into a tunnel. If you're in the back row, you certainly won't see it coming after entering that western saloon. I actually thought this ride was going to end before that drop, so I guess you can call it the first twist ending I've experienced on a roller coaster. It was a bit too jerky for me to enjoy, but it certainly has its place at the park. And number 10 is the Joker, the newest coaster to open at the park. I'll be honest, I didn't really get a good ride on this one. I felt like I was being thrashed forwards and backwards into my seat, and I only got one rotation. However, when it comes to the free spins in general, I realized that some rides are better than others. Each ride is a different experience, and as a result, I wasn't quite sure where to rank this. I have gotten good rides on these SNS free spins. The first ride I got at Great Adventure's Joker was excellent, but for the most part, they're just alright. They're not terrible, but I look forward to other coaster models more than this. Number 9 is Vie Bora. This is the first bobsled coaster I've ever ridden, and is currently one of only 3 Intamin bobsleds still operating in the world. While the coaster itself does suffer from a pretty uncomfortable brake system, I found that it provided a unique ride experience that I found rather enjoyable. The feeling of the bobsled trains freely gliding across the track is actually pretty darn cool. It was about as close to an actual bobsled experience as I'm going to get. Though I will say, because the trains each only seat 3 people, the line for this ride can get pretty long. It even reached an hour long on a Sunday night that wasn't that busy, so make sure you get on this ride first. Coming in at number 8 is Judge Roy's Scream, the park's only wooden roller coaster. Out of all of the new wooden coaster credits I've gotten this year, this one is pretty middle of the road. It wasn't as rough as Hershey Park's Wildcat, but was certainly not as smooth as Yankee Cannonball at Canopy Lake Park. Since it's an out and back coaster, it won't thrash you around that much, but it's admittedly a bumpy ride. With that being said, it wasn't a painful kind of bumpy, but the kind of bumpiness you'd expect on an old wooden coaster. It has a classic feel to it, which I didn't mind. I actually found it to be pretty decent. I liked the roadside and waterside view, and I loved how isolated it was from the rest of the park. You have to go through a tunnel under the road to get to this coaster, and as a result, it has its own little area to itself. It's like a whole different park is open across the street from Six Flags Over Texas, so it sticks out from the rest of the park's attractions. It may not be the smoothest or most exciting ride out there, but you could certainly get a kick out of it. Number 7 is Pandemonium. You would think that this would be an exact clone of the Pandemonium at Six Flags New England, but this actually isn't the case. This coaster is taller, faster, and longer than the one in New England, and believe it or not, is a lot more entertaining. That's not to say the one in New England is bad by any means. I really like that coaster, but this Pandemonium was quite a pleasant surprise. It's got some impressive scenery around it, pulls some excellent G's, spins like crazy, and was an overall pleasure to ride. I actually look forward to riding more of this coaster model than the SNS free spins. Next up at number 6 is Runaway Mountain. When I first boarded this coaster, I didn't expect much. I expected it to be a fun but relatively tame family coaster like Skull Mountain at Six Flags Great Adventure. However, I was astounded at how intense this ride ended up being. Of course, it's nowhere near as intense as some of the park's other coasters, but this was definitely a case of the ride exceeding my expectations. In fact, with the exception of Disney World's Rock and Roller Coaster, this is the tallest and fastest enclosed coaster I've ever ridden. With its intense turns and drops in nearly pitch black darkness, I couldn't get enough of this ride. So I highly recommend it to anyone who loves indoor roller coasters as much as I do. Number 5 is Batman the Ride. Once again, this is a B&M Batman model, one of the most common coaster models in the Six Flags chain. Much like the one at Six Flags Great Adventure, this invert provides a fast-paced and intense ride packed with inversions. Its exhilarating, compact layout never slows down and is always throwing something new at you. Though I didn't find it to be as smooth as the one at Great Adventure, I still had a blast riding it. It's certainly nothing new and is far from my favorite B&M invert, but you really can't go wrong with this model. I certainly wouldn't mind checking out the other Batman the Rides across the country to see how they hold up compared to this. From what I've heard, some are better than others, but I'm confident that I'll enjoy all of them. Number 4 is Titan. When it comes to hypercoasters, Titan is often looked down upon as inferior to the B&M hypers. Though I will admit I do prefer the B&M versions, I didn't think this was a bad coaster at all. Although the way down the first drop wasn't as intense as I would have liked it, once you hit the bottom of that first drop, the ride as a whole was certainly a forceful one. In addition to its impressive speed of 85 miles per hour, and yes, you really do feel it, its two helixes do quite a lot to crank up the intensity. I actually blacked out twice on this ride. As for the airtime, while there wasn't a lot of it, during the course there is one excellent moment of floater airtime that is more than worth noting. Joe Vanola really did a great job with this coaster, and it was no doubt a fun ride. It may not be as airtime packed as the B&M hypers, but it stands on its own as a fine example of a hypercoaster. Taking the bronze is Mr. Freeze Reverse Blast. This right here is my favorite shuttle coaster so far. There is so much to love about this ride. First of all, its backwards launch is simply outstanding. Going through that massive inverting top hat is such an incredible feeling, and when you hit the top of that giant vertical spike, the suspense leading up to the drop back down is undeniably terrifying. I have never ridden this coaster back when it used to start with a forwards launch, but honestly, I don't see it going any other way. The backwards launch really makes this ride stand out among other launch coasters I've ridden, and while it admittedly could use a fresh coat of paint, it's an impressive sight indeed. This is certainly one of those coasters that I would love to marathon over and over again. Coming in second is Shockwave. This was by far the biggest surprise on my trip. Now on the surface, this ride may seem like nothing more than a couple of loops and a meandering course, but it's so much more than that. Not only did I black out on the forceful double loop, but the rest of the ride is packed with excellent flagector airtime. To tell you the truth, I didn't expect nearly as much airtime as I ended up getting on this coaster. Plus, I love how it goes by the highway and over the go-kart track. It really did have a unique setting. Plus, much like Steel Force, you could barely feel the restraints, so the airtime was a lot more enjoyable. Overall, I highly recommend this ride. After all, classic Schwarzkopfs like these are hard to come by nowadays. And now we've come to number 1, and the gold medal is going to the new Texas Giant. This coaster is flat out awesome. Now while I did find Wicked Cyclone to be a bit more intense, I'm still having a hard time deciding which of these two RMCs I liked better overall. New Texas Giant may not have Wicked Cyclone's compact layout, but it's a nice long ride with plenty of ejector airtime, and it's still smooth after 6 years of operation. For the first RMC, it holds up very well nowadays. Now some people would say that the absence of inversions makes this one of the weaker RMCs, but honestly, it doesn't need inversions. It more than makes up for it with its length, its airtime, and its amazing tunnels. To put it bluntly, this is an excellent ride that is more than worth the trip to Six Flags Over Texas alone. Before I sign off for today, I'd like to proudly announce the return of the weekly poll. Now it's been a while since I did the last one, so let's go over the results. With a grand total of 198 votes, the winner is Vertigo at Wallaby, Belgium. Second place went to Ring Racer at Nürburgring, and third went to Orphan Rocker at Scenic World. So sometime in the near future, expect a full video on Vertigo. And for this week's weekly poll, I'd like to ask which of these parks that I haven't been to do you think I should visit first? Although it is pretty early to be making 2018 travel plans, I'd really like to visit some of these places. So if your home park is on here, feel free to head on down to themeparkcrazy.com and cast your vote. Thanks for watching, everyone. Feel free to like, share, and subscribe. You can follow me on social media on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, or you can check out my website at themeparkcrazy.com. This is Theme Park Crazy, and I'll see you all next time.